Hey friends, welcome. This is Julie Tillman. Today's video is part of a giveaway hop with my fellow Not Too Shabby design team members. We're all showcasing the April subscription products. This month features a Sweet Bees and Blooms theme, and I'm working with the Paper Pad Club and the Stamp of the Month. I decided to go for a mixed media look today. It's been a while since I've used this specific resist technique, so we're going to experiment together. I'll be using the Sweet as Honey paper and ephemera and a diagonal background paper from the Petals and Pals paper pad. We'll be transforming this neutral pattern into a fun mixed media background with a stencil, sprays, and distress microglaze. So first off, I'm going to lay the paper down on a sticky mat, and then I have added some pixie spray, repositionable spray to the back of that stencil to keep it in place. And then we're going to apply our distress microglaze with a blending tool through the stencil. And you want to make sure to give it a generous coating. Normally, when I use distress microglaze, it's to seal in a layer of color to keep future layers from blending with the colors below. And in that instance, you want a very thin coating, but for this resist technique, you want a good amount of glaze on the paper. So it doesn't look like much right now since it's clear, but as I peel off the stencil, you can kind of see that pattern taking shape. So now I'm going to lay this down in my splatter box with a paper towel below to catch any extra ink. For sprays, I'm using a flickering candle, wild honey, and rusty hinge. I start with the lightest color, flickering candle, and spritz that in a few areas. And I'm spraying from about 8 inches off the surface of the paper, which I think gives it a nice fine misting. And then I'll go in with the second lightest color, wild honey, and then finish off with a hint of the rusty hinge. Then to make the colors blend a bit, I'll spritz the whole paper with a bit of water, and then we'll pat things dry with a paper towel. And after that, I'm just going to pop this out of my splatter box, and I'm going to dab off any extra bits in the centers of those hexagons. You want to make sure you dab off anything you don't want to show pretty quickly, because if it sits too long on the paper, it might start to soak in. So it's definitely not about perfect application in mixed media. Just play and have fun. Since this is thick printed cardstock, you'll get different results than on mixed media or watercolor paper, but this cardstock is thick enough to take a lot of medium. It just soaks into the paper a little faster. If you don't like that soaked in look, you can apply a thin layer of clear gesso to your paper before adding the microglaze for a more durable surface. So I'm cutting that down to 3 3/4 by 5 inch with a decal trimmer, and then I'm pulling out a scrap of this bee pattern paper I have from the Sweet as Honey paper pad, and I'm just going to do a light blending of a scattered straw ink over most of the paper, and then I'll go in with wild honey a little bit more, and then go back and forth with the scattered straw to get a good blend, and then I will finish off with the rusty hinge around the edges for a nice framing. And then I'm just going to spritz that a little with some water and lift off with a paper towel just to bring back a little bit of the lightness to the center of that panel. I decided I wanted some torn edges to this, so I'm going to just start tearing at least one edge, and I know I'm going to have to go back in with some of that color to just liven it up just a little bit on those edges. At this point, I think I just want the 3 sides to be straight and the one torn. And I'm just going to grab some rusty hinge. And I thought I wanted to do some dripping. And it just didn't turn out the way that I wanted it on the non-gessoed surface. It just was soaking into that pattern paper and not doing the dripping that I wanted. So, that's how you learn. And maybe it would work better with gesso. Maybe some other medium would work better. But I try to fix it here a little bit. And I eventually get a little bit of it to drip, but it's not exactly the honey dripping effect I was looking for. But no matter, it's a background, and I'm going to distress the edges of this anyways. So I'm just pulling out a paper distresser and I'm going to go around those edges. You want to make sure that your paper is really dry here. I ended up tearing mine because it was a little too wet, but as long as you have your paper dry and you're careful, you should not get too many tears. And then I'm just going to use my little pokey tool here. And sometimes I help it along with, help those fibers on the paper bend a little bit by spraying some water. And I just kind of shape that corner curl. And then I'm going to go in with a little bit of that rusty hinge around the edges. And I really liked that crumpled look, so I decided to crumple the paper up even more. So now I'm just adding a little bit of more ink to that, pulling inward so the paper curls up a little bit. And then I just really love those crinkles and I want them to stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to do some direct to paper, just a light, almost a dusting across the folded bits, just to make those creases really stand out and to get a little more precision and control of where the ink is. You can bend it and then just swipe on the bended edge. So I'm liking the way that is. I'm just going to mop up a little bit and add just a little bit more distressing. Then I decided I wanted some splatters, but this first gold that I pulled out was like a little too matchy-matchy with the background. So then I pulled out some Gold Rush Lunar Paste and watered that down just a little bit to give me a gold splatter that's going to have a little more contrast. And so I'm just going to splatter that to my heart's content. And then I'll just give this another dry with my heat tool. And then I'll roughen up the edges of this panel. I decided that I didn't want the straight edges on that B paper. And I think we need a darker color matte for contrast. So I picked a ginger cardstock from scrapbook.com and I just tore the strip of it wide enough for my paper piece. And then I cut it down to size and do a little distressing on the edges just so things don't look so uniform. And then as I lay things down, I decide that I want a little more interest behind this panel. So I pull out some burlap twine and I just wrap it around that background panel a couple times and tie a little knot so that we have a little bit of interest back there. And then I will put that panel above it on foam dimensions so that it can go over the knot without any problem. And then I decided that a lot of my gold splatter was covered up with that panel, so I added some gold splatter to that panel and now I'm just gluing that down. And then I'll just roughen up those edges just with my fingernail. And then we're going to add that dimensional tape and I'm just going to do it about 3 strips on the top and 3 on the bottom and then place that right over that burlap. And then I'm just going to put a paperweight over that to help it stick while it's drying. And then I decided that I really liked this bee ephemera on the flower, but I just wasn't loving the white border. So I decided to do a little fussy cutting. And here I am just like cleaning up some of those cuts. And then I'm going to use some ink, scattered straw and wild honey and go around the edges, but I just added a little bit of repositionable tape to kind of mask off that wing because I definitely want to keep it white. So I'm just using the scattered straw first and just going around the edges, and that will cover up any of the little white areas that were left when I was doing my cutting. And then I'm going to go in with the warm honey or wild honey as well. So then I'll just finish up inking those edges and then I'll bring in some Copic markers just to add a little accents to fill in any spaces that I left behind with a Y11 marker. And then I think I use a YG63 for the stem. Then I decide to go back in with the rusty hinge and I forget about that tip, but it is okay. I just put a little bit of water on my finger and brushed it off and it came off really easily. So there I am just adding that YG63 to the stem. And then I'm going to put this on here and I really like the way it turned out. So I think that means that my fussy cutting was totally worth it. So now we have most of the elements on the card done. It's time to pick a sentiment, and I pull out the stamp of the month, and there's quite a few little sentiments that we can use, and I'm going to use the Sweet Hello to You, and I stamped that onto a white die cut from the One and Done sentiment die. Once it's stamped, I decided to partially die cut the end to make a slightly shorter strip, and then I decided to add a little foam tape to the back of this, and I just added a little liquid glue to add to the stem. So the stem is directly on the sentiment banner, and then the flower is popped up on foam tape. And then I'm going to add a little foam tape to either side of that sentiment banner and a little liquid adhesive to make everything stay down nice and secure. And that pretty much completes the card making process. I'm just going to add a paperweight for this to dry, and then once it's dry, I'm going to add it to an A2 card base. So what do you think? Do you like mixed media in your card making? I'd love to know. Just let me know in the comments. I had a lot of fun with this resist technique. It's a really fun way to jazz up a more neutral print and kind of make it your own. So that was a lot of fun. As I mentioned earlier, this video is part of a design team hop, so be sure to check out the playlist in the description box to see what the rest of the team has created. Then we'd love it if you'd give everyone some likes, share a little love in the comments, and enter for your chance to win. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.